the labor. I'm your host, Sean Borman. With me again is Nick Olson of Vikings Territory. And Nick, I actually just wanted to get started with the Kyle Rudolph bit today. I know he's up. He's a Vikings nominee for Walter Payton Man of the Year, and pretty cool video. I'm sure it kind of made its way around Twitter. What are your thoughts on the video? And did you cry at work like the rest of us?
I don't know if I cried, but it was definitely a very moving video. It's awesome what he's doing there. So obviously a well-deserved um, Walter Payton Man of the Year nomination. So hope he wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we got some bad news. I guess the Vikings lost in New England. Not a whole lot of good to take from that. In fact, a lot of negative this week. More talk about the lack of the running game. More knocks on John DeFilippo and his play calling. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, starting with the running game and Delvin Cook. I'm curious to know. I guess you kind of hinted on Twitter that short passes are kind of make up for the lack of a running game for the Vikings right now. But should Delvin Cook be getting more carries?
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted out that Dalvin Cook got 40% of our touches before we were down two scores in the fourth, and at that point, you're not going to give Dalvin Cook the ball that much because you want to score and you want to score fast. So we gave our running backs, I think, half of our touches before that point, so a little over half. So they were getting the ball a lot. The thing is, a lot of it was schemed throws in addition to running back carries, and I don't think that's a bad game plan or strategy because we are dead last in the NFL in success rate on runs. We are dead last in the NFL on expected points added per runs. We're just really bad at running the ball. So when you can't run the ball very well, a nice way to supplement it is to go to the quick passing game. And Dalvin Cook's a phenomenal receiving back, so I don't have an issue with that. It might not look on the box score as the same thing as running, but it's really a running back screen or a wheel route or a quick pass to the flat is kind of the same principles. You just don't have your front five blocking for you, but works the same way. Controls the clock, gets a pretty reliable chunk of yards. So I didn't have an issue with that, but I do get why when you see Dalvin Cook going off for 9, 10 yards per carry, why we wouldn't do it more often. So I think that's a valid criticism of the game plan. I think the Patriots were kind of selling out to stop the pass, so probably should have run it a little bit more. But what can you do?
Yeah, and I'm kind of in agreement with you here, but I'm still of the belief, and I just tweeted it a little while ago too. I'm old school. I want to see us ground and pound. I want to see us run the ball rather. And I get the fact that you can do the short, quick passes that kind of replace the runs, but don't you kind of need a rhythm on the ground? I mean, why do you think the run game is failing at this point? Is it the play calling?
Well, I don't really think I like DiFilippo's play calling. It's pretty creative. He's brought in some of the power stuff that he was doing in Philly. Obviously, we run a zone-based scheme, and we did. That's what Shermer brought to the offense, and DiFilippo's carried that over. But he's brought in some of the power runs. You'll see pulling guards. You'll see we do trap blocks maybe once or twice a game. So, um, and we've done some creative reverses. We've had Brian O'Neill, cut across the entire play and sort of do block on reverses. So he's bringing some nice unpredictability there. It's not all just like inside zone, outside zone, inside zone, that kind of thing. So I don't mind the play calling. I just think the blocks are not. We're failing on blocks every play. So run blocking has just been very poor, and we're not executing. So it's a struggle to continue to run the ball when your running backs keep getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. So I don't know. I get why we don't do it as much.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible when you look at the numbers to see how oh it's numbers. I get it. It's a passing league, whatnot, but it shows in the PFF grades the I guess the weak run blocking grades of the offensive lineman. It's actually quite surprising. Uh,
Yeah.
but speaking of kind of surprising was Adam Thielen's performance and Stephon Diggs and the lack thereof on Sunday. Do you think it was kind of it was just surprising to see them not get the ball on the short crossing routes? I saw Diggs was wide open quite a few times, and again, do you think it was just Cousins being scared, or what was the deal with that?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to judge. I mean, Diggs was open all game. I actually thought Diggs had a really good game. But Cousins wasn't targeting him a lot, and part of that was because the Patriots were blitzing like crazy. They blitzed on nearly 40% of dropbacks, which is almost double what the average is. So they went very blitz happy. Um, and when they weren't blitzing, they were showing pressure too. So they'd show blitz with seven, but only rush three or four. So I think Kirk had a quick internal clock that made him want to pull the trigger on passes a little quick. And it's hard to judge. You see Diggs get open, but you don't know at what point in the progression Kirk is looking at Diggs necessarily. So um, tough to judge that. Diggs was the Patriots' plan for their secondary was basically have their number one corner. We talked about this before, and it was kind of what we expected. They had Gilmore shadow Diggs for the most part, not every snap, but Diggs probably got more attention from Gilmore. And then Thielen, they were bracketing, they were doubling, and they were shading the safety over. So it was kind of double team Thielen, put your shutdown corner on Diggs, and if they can beat you with Aldrick Robinson, let's go. And Kirk, to his credit, did target Aldrick Rob. This was an Aldrick Robinson game. He had like 7 targets or something. That's kind of why. So, um, but it's when you're getting rid of the ball every two seconds in the pocket because they're blitzing every snap, it's tough to let those downfield routes develop. So
Yeah, I did notice that, and I thought you did a great job. Nick just had an article today on how the Patriots kind of had the Vikings beat pre-snap most times, and I thought that Belichick defense, that amoeba front as you called it, I thought that's a pretty cool concept, especially against teams with weaker run offenses. So I thought that was pretty cool of you to point that out. And what are your thoughts on that?
yes.
Do you think Zimmer will implement that at all?
Zimmer is so focused on his run defense. The amoeba, I agree. The amoeba defense is a lot of fun to watch, just because it's like when you watch it live, everybody's moving around. It's so confusing. It's so unpredictable, and there's so much blitzing. So it's a fun defense to watch. But the problem is when you have guys constantly changing what they're doing. If you time your snap well, you're going to screw up all your assignments, and it's really tough to maintain gap integrity. And to defend the run, everybody has their gap between specific blockers that they have to fill. And when everybody's moving around pre-snap, it's very easy to screw those up. And you just run one guy misses his block, you do an inside zone, and the back finds the cutback lane, and he's gone for 15 yards or something. So Zimmer is very gap sound. He wants his deep. That's why Zimmer. The amoeba defense is kind of similar to his double A gap stuff that he does with Harrison Smith on the edge, except that is the gaps are very refined and set in stone, and people know what they're doing, and it's difficult to screw up your gap. Whereas with the amoeba defense, you're kind of saying, um, we don't care about if we're going to give up a bad run play because we're kind of selling out to screw up your pre-snap read and to make you feel like everybody's coming and you have no idea what's going to happen. So yeah, that's probably why you haven't seen Belichick do it that often either. I think Dom Capers was the original one who brought it to the NFL back like 5 years ago. Before, I mean, you saw it in college a little bit too, but it's it has some interesting upside, but the downside is you're screwing over your run defense. So
Yeah, I'm interested to see if the Vikings maybe do incorporate some of that into the defense because they have so many good playmakers as it is, and the run defense for the most part is pretty solid. They're a pretty disciplined group, so I personally would love to see more of that amoeba front. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out that article by Nick. He does a great job showing that on film. But I wanted to touch on a couple more things on that Patriots game. First of all, the little scuffle between, I don't even, you can't even call it scuffle, a little verbal argument between Thielen and Bill Belichick. What are your thoughts on that? I thought that was kind of funny.
As I think I saw it was Pro Football Commentator on Twitter being like, biggest shock ever. Belichick hates Thielen because he's a scrappy white receiver. He's like the Patriots mold, white all pro receiver. Uh, yeah, I mean, I get why Thielen is. Everybody has this image of Adam Thielen as like this quiet, humble farm boy, Jordy Nelson type, and he's like, he's super fiery, competitive on the field, and he's always screaming at the refs. He's always like fired up. He's always like I don't want to say he's a diva on the field, but he really lets his emotions show on the field. So it wasn't surprising for and Thielen was upset because I think it was Chung was injured on the play, and it was on that third and short where it wasn't clear if the Vikings got it. So Belichick was thinking about challenging it, and Thielen thought that Chung was faking an injury so that Belichick had a little extra time to have his people look at the tape and see if he should challenge it. So Thielen was like, "That's a screwy, smarmy move," and Belichick was just "f you" back at him. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
that
It was
was
it was a it was an entertaining moment from the game. So
yeah, that's for sure. And I think I don't know if it's just us Minnesotans or just us football fans, but we like to see that fire. That's you got your Joe Mauers who are just as chill as they can be always. So I think it's nice to see that passion every once in a while. Uh,
yeah,
and that kind of well, there's no really any smooth transition to this, but something I noticed during the game. Maybe it was just me, but it sure seemed to me they kept showing close-ups of Tom Brady, after the Patriots drives, like well into the third quarter. I swear he didn't even like break a sweat at all. It just looked like they're just on cruise control. He's just doing exactly what they had planned. Maybe it just looked like that, but it sure didn't look like the Vikings were getting a whole lot of pressure on him or bothering him uh, at all, really.
yeah. That was, I think, by design. They were getting rid of the ball super super fast. It was just very much here's the pre-snap read. Let's confirm it post-snap and throw it. Brady wasn't doing 3 4 man progressions. He was okay, man coverage. Okay, pick play, throw it to Hogan in the slot. Boom. Okay, next play. Okay, cover two. I'm gonna throw the post. Boom. Okay, and it was a lot. I mean, if you look at Brady's next gen stats, puts out these charts where you can see exactly where the quarterback threw every throw, and where they were targeted, where the receiver was. Brady's throws were super super short. So it was like 2 second, 1 second drop back, three step drop backs, and then go. So a lot of screens, a lot of stuff. They were clearly worried about Daniil Hunter and the rest of that defensive line. So I think that was I've seen some people get a little antsy that Hunter hasn't had a sack in 3 games, and that's just because teams are now realizing what a beast he is. So they're getting rid of the ball as fast as they can. So not Hunter had a fine game. I didn't have any issues with him. So that was just part of the Patriots' plan was get rid of the ball as fast as they can. So
How about? I'm not sure how much tape you've watched or anything, but did you check the interior defensive line? Did Sheldon Richardson, did Linval Joseph, were they able to generate much pressure? It sure didn't seem like that watching the game.
I thought they were winning their blocks a decent amount. The Patriots have, I don't want to say they're like the best line in the league, but they have probably the best offensive line coach in the league, Scarnecchia. Um, and I would say we struggled a little bit more with a run defense. You saw them gash us with a couple runs up the middle, and I will say this year, I feel like Linval and Sheldon have been a little disappointing in their run defense. They kind of get easily moved more easily than I thought they would. And Sheldon will often get double teamed and he'll spin out of it, but then he'll spin into the wrong gap and somebody will run right by him. So they're both very talented players. And I think they're very good. But this I think they were winning their pass rush snaps a decent amount, but they weren't necessarily getting a lot of pressure just because of how fast they were getting rid of the quarter, getting rid of the football.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I agree with you. It's been a little disappointing as far as that run defense, but that kind of leads me into the Vikings' next game at Seattle. Huge game. Arguably bigger than the Patriots game, just as far as playoff implications go. Uh, how do the Vikings go about containing another great quarterback? This is the third fantastic one in a row in Russell Wilson.
Yeah, Rady, Rogers, Wilson. We had like Breeze a few weeks before that. It's been a murderer's row of quarterbacks. And it's funny, people have like debates about like is Russell Wilson elite? When Zimmer, this was a few weeks back in a presser, they were asking him about like going up against Rogers and how good he is. And Zimmer was like, yeah, anytime you face somebody like Rogers, Brady, Breeze, Russell Wilson, it was like, oh well, okay, Zimmer would put Wilson on the same level as those guys. So. Um, yeah, how do you stop someone like Wilson? It's tough because he is one of the most accurate passers in the league. He's got a great arm. He's very smart, and of course, he's got that scrambling athleticism that just adds a whole nother dimension to it. It's like Mitch Trubisky, but with a significant amount of accuracy and arm talent on top of it. So um, it's tough. We will probably do. Um, well, I don't know if we'll necessarily have a spy on Wilson or if we'll just hope our pass rush plays contained, but we'll see what happens. He's a very talented quarterback, and that's going to be tough to figure out. So
All right, I just got to ask you: are you that high on Mitch Trubisky that you'd you know dare to say down the road he could be at the same level as those guys? Or are you just simply making the comparison with him and Wilson?
um, I liked Mitch coming out of the draft. I didn't like have a full college scouting profile on him or anything, but from what I've seen so far in the NFL, I think I would compare him to Blake Bortles. I don't think he's very accurate. I don't think he makes smart decisions with the football. I think he's outrageously athletic, though, and he will absolutely destroy teams with his legs. So, but at the same time, Nagy, he's in such a great system with Nagy. I think Nagy is such a phenomenal offensive coach. So they've set him up to do a lot of good things, even though he'll make boneheaded throws and inaccurate throws and miss people by a mile. Um, and the thing is, when you're a young quarterback, we've seen quarterbacks lacking in things develop over the years. Peyton Manning had a famously set the interception record his rookie year, and more recently we saw Jared Goff have like a historically bad rookie year, and now he's like an MVP candidate. So Carson Wentz too, he was a little bit of a disappointment his rookie year, an MVP candidate his sophomore year. So I wouldn't say Mitch's long term prospects are bad, but I don't think of him as even a top 20 quarterback right now.
Okay, I just thought of something too. I kind of want to break away from the Patriots game for a second and
Sure.
talk about Vikings quarterback future. Uh, First of all, they don't draft quarterbacks very often. I guess the Vikings aren't known for taking a lot of early round picks on quarterbacks. With Cousins at the helm, and somebody kind of pointed out this to me on Twitter. Do you think the Vikings would be willing to draft a guy early this year, knowing how good Goff and the younger quarterbacks have been lately, and develop him for a year or two under Cousins, knowing that worst case this guy could take over?
I would. I don't think they are, but if I were GM, I would just because of. I mean, my philosophy is always draft quarterbacks, just because it's by far the most valuable position. And if you get your Russell Wilson or whoever your lottery ticket in the draft, and they come along, that's just so much more valuable than a left guard is ever going to be. So
Or a
I think you
kicker?
should always, yeah, or a kicker. Um, I think that you're always going to want to take that lottery ticket because you're trying to win Super Bowls, not just have a solid offensive line and go 9-7 or something. So I always think we should draft quarterbacks. At the same time, Cousins is the guy, and he's good enough that he's well above replacement level. So you don't want to get rid of him. You don't want to necessarily bring in competition and take snaps away from him. So I would draft quarterbacks just because I think the position is that valuable that it's always worth taking a shot. But I think Cousins is the guy for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there too. I would do the same, but I would do so knowing that I'd be taking away opportunities to protect Cousins, with some better offensive linemen. So it's kind of a give or take. It depends on how the draft plays out, kind of situation. I think. So
Yeah.
anyway, getting back to the Vikings Seahawks, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Seattle's defense, who's not, they're not the group that they once were, but they've kind of got a new identity. Uh, Bobby Wagner really being the leader of that group. So talk a little bit about Seattle's defense and what the Vikings offense will be facing there, and uh, just the overall environment too, like what it's like, playing at Seattle, such a loud stadium, and the challenge the Vikings are facing, I guess, on a Monday night in Seattle.
Yeah, that's tough. And Seattle, it always feels like they're the loudest stadium. I don't know if they're consistently the loudest, but that's a very hard place to play in. You're not going to Uh, and people don't know necessarily, but the noise really screws with the away team because they can't hear the coach in their ear set. They can't hear the play calls. It screws stuff up. It causes false starts. It causes penalties on defense. So it's a tough environment to play in. A lot of people thought Seattle was going to fall off a cliff this season since the Legion of Boom is all broken
Yeah,
up and
I sure did.
um, Cam's gone, Sherman's gone, everybody else. All the defensive linemen. Sheldon Richardson left, so people were predicting its doom, and I think people underrate one. Bobby Wagner is probably the best linebacker in football, and they still had Earl Thomas. Of course, Earl Thomas is now hurt, but when he's healthy, he's right up there with Harrison Smith as one of the best in the game. They've got some talented players, but more importantly, Pete Carroll is just one of the best defensive coaches. And I think people don't appreciate how good of a defensive coach he is because he kind of settled into his cover three scheme and um, didn't deviate from it from a while. But that was because the personnel were so good at it. And now that Earl Thomas is hurt and he doesn't have the Sherman elite press corners necessarily. He's mixing it up. He'll throw in Tampa two. He'll run cover two. He's doing all sorts of different things schematically, and that's kind of fun to see from a game planning perspective. He's dipping more into the creative defensive genius that he is, and it's setting them up. I don't think they're world beaters. I think they struggle in a lot of different ways. On defense, they don't generate very much pressure. They kind of don't have a lot of talent necessarily as pass rushers. The secondary there's some interesting talent there, but there aren't any. I wouldn't say there are any Pro Bowlers there now that Earl Thomas is hurt. So they're vulnerable, but at the same time, they're just extremely well coached, both from like a technical standpoint and from a schematic standpoint. So that's a tough challenge.
Oh yeah, sorry, you kind of cut out there. Uh,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And as far as I know, it's going to be a pretty big challenge there for the Vikings offense. Going into that tough environment, against Seattle. Offensively, how can we take away that crowd and take away, any defensive momentum that the Seahawks might get? You looking for the Vikings to go against what they've done the whole season and try and actually establish the run, or are they going to keep on doing what they're doing?
I think the way to beat Seattle is through the air. Maybe we saw that last drive against the Patriots, the kind of hurry up, no huddle, go really well. We've seen that work really well in other situations. That can work well at away games because it kind of sucks the momentum out of the defense and it takes away a lot of the pre-snap advantages that the home team has just because of the crowd noise. So that's one way to do it. And I think Diggs and Thielen are set for good matchups. So I think when you're running up against Seattle's front seven, you're going to struggle to run the ball very well. Maybe we can get Cook out in space a little bit, maybe a little bit of outside zone, but I think this is a Thielen and Diggs game. So that's the way I'd attack it, at least.
Yeah, I kind of thought that about last game too. You think Seattle's defense will kind of do the Patriots thing and take away Thielen and make Cousins go to Diggs?
I don't think Seattle has a cornerback nearly as good as Stephon Gilmore. I think Gilmore's having an all-pro caliber season, and Seattle doesn't have anyone like that. But I don't know. I think it's going to be one of those situations where every team do it differently. Some teams bracket one, some teams put one their number one corner and shadow him, and some teams I think was it the Jets just double teamed both of them every play. They were like screw having safeties. We're just going to double both of them. So that was a different approach. We'll see what Seattle does. I don't think. I mean, they're good, but the thing is, when you sell out to stop Diggs and Thielen, like Dalvin Cook, Kyle Rudolph, the rest of that offense is pretty good too. So, um, I think you can try different things. If I were Seattle, um, I wouldn't necessarily double team either of them. I just kind of run the defense that's been working for me the rest of the season.
Yeah, whatever they're doing is working. Like you said before, I did not expect them to even be in the playoff hunt at this point. So it's like I said, whatever they're doing is working. They're still in the thick of things.
I
So
mean,
I
they're
just want
very
to ask
talented.
you. Yeah, they are a very talented team. Um, and just kind of zooming out a little bit, excuse me, from a broader perspective, I know Vikings fans. I know Matthew Kohler from ESPN or Collar put out a tweet today that just says he's not getting as many views. Vikings fans might be a little bit down at the moment after that big loss against the Patriots and a couple really big losses, honestly, on some primetime games. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the team right now. Well, what are your thoughts on the state of the team, and are you worried at all going forward?
Yeah, I saw that tweet from Collar, and it was funny because it's just like there's so much doom and gloom. All of Vikings Twitter right now is fire DiFilippo and fire Zimmer and blow it all up. And this was supposed to be our Super Bowl year, and we suck. And it's like, guys, we have a winning record. Like I don't know, maybe people were expecting us to go 16-0, but sustained success in the NFL is difficult. Getting back to the playoffs um, is already you're lucky if you make it to the playoffs 2 years in a row. Most teams don't. And unless you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, that shouldn't be your expectation. So while I think the Vikings had a great offseason and had a 13-3 season last year, you should temper your expectations if you were expecting a repeat of last year. And the other thing is like even with all the bad losses, we're still in a very good position to make the playoffs. Like even if we lose in Seattle, we've got like a 50% shot to make the playoffs. And if we win, we're basically in. So it's a tough matchup, but I don't know. I feel like this is the exact type of team that could gel and make a run in the playoffs. So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic.
I couldn't agree more, actually. And I was just thinking about that the other day. I'm like, looking back to the off season, I'm like, there's nothing really that went wrong at all. In fact, we had about the best off season possible if you really like think about it. Like we got the best offensive coordinator available for the most part, the best quarterback available for the most part. So I mean, the best defensive tackle. So it's really weird to I guess see us at 6-5-1 and kind of panicking. But I get it. I wouldn't. I wouldn't panic, but I get it. You know the people being scared, what have you. But I think it is a little early yet, and we still have 4 games left. That's a quarter of the season.
Yeah. And like we're
But
in a we're in a great position for a playoff spot. And like this is the exact kind of team that if the Vikings made a run in the playoffs and like made it to the Super Bowl, like everybody would say like, "Oh, of course the Vikings are the kind of team to make a run in the playoff." Like, look how good they are. Look at how good Cousins, if they signed Cousins and Diggs and Thielen are both Pro Bowlers. And that Zimmer defense is phenomenal. And like we're like the 2011 Giants that like, yeah, they screwed some things up, but when they start clicking, they're unstoppable. So
yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, let's
And
hope
I say,
they
we could
gel.
we could also totally do the Vikings thing and screw the pooch and miss the playoffs, and that's also entirely possible. But I don't know. That's what makes it fun. So I'm excited
That's
to see these last 4 games.
and maybe that's what's wrong is that there's no real build up yet for the big letdown. If you know what I mean, like it's just been kind of steady disappointment throughout the year. So maybe we'll get to that point where we get the ultimate build up at some point. But
Yeah,
anyway, getting what's that?
It's not the Vikings' way to like just steadily disappoint you. They got to get your hopes up before dashing your
Yeah,
heart on the rocks. So we know it's
exactly,
coming.
exactly. So I was just going to get to the injury report today. Nothing too major aside from Diggs being limited with a knee. I expect him to play again Monday night. But I did see actually Darren Wilson tweeted that he hears that David Morgan's could be back this week. If anything, he said he'll be back next week. So I know we've talked about him and him being so important to the run game. There's also Kendricks did not play as well with the rib injury, so I think that'll be worth watching this week. And that's actually something I kind of wanted to ask you about too. What would our defense look like without Kendricks?
We'd probably have a lot more Eric Wilson. They're kind of similar players, about six. I want to say Wilson's 6 foot and Eric Kendricks is 6'1", but they're both around 200, 210, 20 pounds. So smaller will linebackers. Great in coverage, very rangy. Kendricks is the one you would trust a lot more to not screw up because he's been doing it for so much longer. And when Barr's been out, Kendricks has been the one wearing the green dot, calling the plays. So Kendricks is a better player, but um, like I'd worry a lot more about us having Barr out because I think Wilson is significantly smaller than Barr. I think Wilson is a pretty good backup will linebacker. So if Kendricks can't go, that's a bummer, but I trust Wilson.
And your thoughts on Kendrick's season so far?
Yeah, I tweeted out the people that I thought were gonna deserve a Pro Bowl vote, and I got a lot of comments of people saying like Kendricks should be in the Pro Bowl, and I don't know. I don't Kendricks has been I don't want to say terrible this year, but it hasn't been his best year. He's made some good plays. I guess I see he's made some great tackles for loss and pass deflections, but he's also been picked on a ton in coverage, and he's a step late to coverage a lot. He's been making mistakes in his run discipline. He's getting moved off his spot in the run game. We washed out on blocks, so it hasn't really been his best year, in my opinion. Um, so, I mean, he's a talented player. It's not like I regret us extending him because I think he's a great player, but haven't necessarily seen it this year as much.
Yeah, and I think he downright has been terrible in some stretches this year, if I'm being totally honest. And
He's had
you've
some
never
bad
really
games.
seen Yeah, you've never really
Yeah,
seen that in his career. So it's surprising to see. I'm not one to believe that it has anything to do with his extension. It's just, I know did he put on some weight this year, and maybe that's has something to do with slowing him down. And like you said, he's been picked on in pass coverage, but I've been a little disappointed with Kendrick so far. But he does seem like he's playing with a little more consistency as of late.
yeah.
So so that's about all I have, Nick. Is there anything you'd like to add? You'd like want to talk about the odds of the Vikings making the playoffs at this point?
I feel pretty good. We're in.
Yeah,
I would feel a lot, we could be in a pretty bad position, but all the other wild card spots just keep losing. Like the
that's a
Eagles,
great point.
Cowboys, the Panthers are on like a 3 game losing streak. So we're in a good position. So you could easily see us losing the Seattle game, but we play the Bears at home to end the season. And I like our chances. Bears are good, but at home I like our chances. And we play the Dolphins and who do we play week 16? You remember?
You said the Dolphins and the Lions.
Is it Lions? Yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah,
play the Lions. So that's a win. Those are winnable games. I like our chances. So I'm pretty confident. Oh, one thing I should say before we close out is like there's been
yeah,
so much criticism of John DiFilippo lately, and
yeah. How do you get your thoughts?
I I get it. And obviously, when you have like one of the best offenses in the league last year, you upgrade at quarterback and you draft this tackle and you do all this other stuff to make the offense better. You go out and you get like this super hyped offensive mind that just turned Nick Foles into a Super Bowl MVP and designed the Eagles' league-leading red zone offense. You have high expectations, and obviously the Vikings offense is not meeting those expectations. So people have kind of had it out for DiFilippo, and I think he makes an easy scapegoat because people don't want to say Cousins has been bad, and obviously Thielen and Diggs aren't bad. I think everyone agrees on that. So, you can say the offensive line hasn't been that great, but at the same time, it's pretty similar to last year's offensive line. So I think it's easy to say, okay, by process of elimination, it has to be flipped, but um, I don't have an issue with the play calling. There are things I can criticize a little bit. Like we probably should have run more inside zone with Dalvin Cook in the Patriots game. We probably could have come up with some better play calls. But a lot of the plays, I went back and I watched and I was like, actually, that's a pretty good play call. The Patriots just made a good play, or that's a good play call. But Adam Thielen dropped the ball, or Kirk Cousins threw an uncatchable pass. So little basic miscommunications, execution errors. So I feel like that's more to blame for the Vikings' struggles. And I think that just comes with having a first year offensive coordinator. Arif Hassan had a really great article on DiFilippo and why it might be time to tap the brakes a little bit on, you know, chasing him out of the town with an angry mob. So I think he's a good enough coach to earn some patience. And, we've seen that's not just, Pollyanna-ish. You know, I'm not saying that out of nothing because we saw in the Packers game, we saw in the Rams game especially, he really knows how to make this offense effective. We just haven't necessarily seen it a ton recently. But if you think back to earlier in the season, we've seen flashes from DiFilippo that makes me think he could turn out to be one of the next great offensive minds. So, McVay had a bad year in Washington. Shanahan's first year, they wanted him fired from Atlanta. Doug Peterson sucked with the Eagles his first year. A lot of these like great offensive minds now, they struggled their first year. So it happens.
Yeah, and uh, yeah, I think that's a great point as well. And I don't know much or enough to really form much of opinion aside from I like to run the ball more. But one thing I wanted to bring up was, Shermer was here for pretty much 2 years. Also, he came in as the tight ends coach, and then he kind of took over for Norv halfway through the year. So he basically had a year and a half, and that first half a year showed promise, but it took him a little time to get his groove, and maybe it's the same with DiFilippo. But one thing I guess I
Yeah.
would like to see out of the offense, what Schumer did very well, was move the pocket for Case Keenum, and I haven't seen much of that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen much of that. At least not that I've noticed during games with Cousins. Do you think Cousins is made for that type of, I guess, play calling and that type of scheme?
I do. That's probably something that DiFilippo could be doing a little bit more, is running more of those boots and um, those rollouts. I think Cousins he's not the best quarterback on the run, but he's good enough to do it. And he's more athletic than you'd think. He's such a prototypical pocket passer, but especially in Washington, Shanahan loved to run zone reads with Cousins in the red zone, and a lot of times the defensive end would crash down on the running back, and then Cousins would just sprint gingerly into the end zone. So we could probably move the pocket a little bit more. That would be another way to help out the bad pass protection. So that's one thing we could do. I wouldn't mind seeing more of it. So it's probably something that we could be seeing more of going forward, hopefully.
Awesome. Well, now we'll end it on that note because I feel very smart at the moment. So, was there anything else you wanted to add, Nick?
No, just
Okay.
looking forward to Monday night.
Yeah, it's a huge game. I'm hoping we can go into Seattle, pull off a victory, and get this fan base rejuvenated again. I know people are going to be watching, but we need we need to build up that excitement, right? Whether it be let down or the opposite this year, we've got to build it up some way.
Definitely.
So that is it for tonight, guys. Appreciate you joining us. Nick, thank you again. And we'll be joining you guys next week. So have a good night, everybody. Let's go.
Thanks, Sean.
Yep.